as one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen in fire or land seen on water. Only because of him do the material universes, temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature, appear factual although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations in the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Dharma projita kaitravota paramo nirmatsaranam satam vidyam vastavam atra vastu shivadam tapatrayon mulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kim Vaparir Ishvara Sadyo Hridi Avarudyate Tra Krite Vihi Sususubhistakshanat. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are completely pure in heart. Which are understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient within itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the supreme truth is established within his heart. I'm sorry, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. Nigama kalpatarur galitam phalam Sukumakad amritam dravya samyutam Pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam Muhur aho rasika bhuvi bhavakaha. O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desire tree of Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful. Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 8, verse number 38. As the name and fame of a particular body is finished with the disappearance of the living spirit, similarly, if you do not look upon us, all our fame and activities, along with the Pandavas and Yadus, will end at once. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Kunti Devi is quite aware that the existence of the Pandavas is due to Sri Krishna only. The Pandavas are undoubtedly well established in name and fame and are guided by the great King Yudhisthira, who is morality personified. And the Yadus are undoubtedly great allies, but without the guidance of Lord Krishna, all of them are non-entities, as much as the senses of the body are useless without the guidance of consciousness. No one should be proud of his prestige, power, and fame without being guided by the favor of the Supreme Lord. The living beings are always dependent, and the ultimate dependable object is the Lord himself. We may therefore invent by our advancement of material knowledge all sorts of counteracting material resources. But without being guided by the Lord, all such inventions end in fiasco, however strong and stout the reactionary elements may be. So what he's talking about here is, when he says, invent by our advancement of material knowledge all sorts of counteracting material resources. Those are things like Viagra and things like Botox and things like monkey gland replacement of sexual organs, and things like nanotechnology and all these different things to make the body live longer or to stop death. They're all what you would call counteracting, trying to counteract the material resources. But without being guided by the Lord, all such inventions end in fiasco, however strong and stout the reactionary elements may be. So the reactionary elements are all these so-called intelligent advancements by material knowledge for counteracting the natural forces of nature. So the false ego develops more and more by this mundane knowledge and mundane science and technology. And actually, every time there's one material advancement, there's three new problems. Like, for example, by building airports with jets, the travel time has become less between, let's say, New York and London. However, to get to the airport and fighting traffic in New York is such a thing that sometimes it takes 1, 2, maybe hours to get to the airport. And then you have to wait 1, 2, or 3 hours to get on the plane. And then the plane takes like 6 hours to get to London. And you have to wait sometimes half an hour, 1 hour to get through the customs and immigration in London. And then it could take you an hour or more to get into New York. So the waiting time is sometimes longer than the travel time. Why is that? Well, to build an airport, you can't build the airport in the middle of the city, so it has to be built outside. And the city is constantly expanding, so then they have to build roads and highways to get to the airport. And then a lot of people want to fly, so even those highways get clogged and blocked. And so one advancement caused 3 new problems, you say. So it doesn't mean that society is actually advancing when you take into account the importance of time on the life of a person. They're probably wasting more time than they're gaining. And actually, traveling all over the world is not an absolute necessity. A person can stay anywhere in this world and develop Krishna consciousness. Because Krishna consciousness requires regularity, steadiness, and constant repetition, and let's say having a regulated life. So how can you be regulated if you keep changing time zones? You go from one time zone to another, or you skip 4 time zones to get somewhere. It completely throws off your regulation and all your biorhythms and everything. So we see that what Prabhupada is saying here, living beings are always dependent, and the ultimate dependable object is the Lord Himself. In other words, if we depend on anyone else, we will be misled. But if we depend on Krishna and Krishna's sincere representatives, we cannot be misled. So, he says, we may therefore invent by our advancement of material knowledge all sorts of counteracting material resources. But without being guided by the Lord, all such inventions end in fiasco. Fiasco means a gigantic failure. But without being guided by the Lord, all such inventions end in fiasco, however strong and stout the reactionary elements may be. Like, for example, having your body frozen as soon as you're declared medically dead. That doesn't mean your heart stops or your brain stops, but according to the mundane doctors, you're medically dead. So immediately they freeze someone. And then the understanding is that later on, the body that's immersed completely in liquid nitrogen will be unfrozen and come back alive, and then they'll be able to heal that person, because with the advancement of science, they've found a cure for the disease that caused the person to die. That whole thing is a hoax. It's all a bunch of nonsense. It's not true. But yet people believe it. The first persons that were going to do this and pay for it, you have to pay for it every year to keep the machine going. The first person said, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm praying that it will. Well, that's the whole point. Nobody knows if it's going to work. It's not going to work. They found many animals that were frozen, and even human beings that were frozen in Siberia, and their body is virtually intact. But when they unfreeze the body, the person's dead. So how is it going to work? Well, they give all this hocus pocus science, liquid nitrogen is different than ice, blah, 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 blah. But this is called hope against hope. The people are hoping that something is true that is not true. And when that fails, then there's a new hope that they develop about something that's not true, but they hope it is true. Just like they hoped that Obama would solve the problem of racism. He made it worse. And then they hope that Trump will save the economy or save the nation from going down into chaos and so forth. That's hope against hope. Then after Obama, there'll be another one. They hope that this one will save the situation and that one will save the situation. It's hope against hope, and every time it gets more desperate, because without Krishna consciousness, without Krishna's guidance, without Krishna's devotees, sincere devotees, and helping people, there's no hope. You cannot hope that the body will exist forever. But you have a right to understand that the soul is eternal. So which thing should we spend more time with, the soul or the body? The body is destined to be defeated, but the soul cannot be defeated. Najayate mriyate va kadachin. Because it was never born and it never dies. The body is born and is destined to die. So therefore, instead of this materialistic culture where we base everything on the body, we should develop the spiritual culture where it's all based on the eternal soul. And text 39, O Gadadhara, Krishna, our kingdom is now being marked by the impressions of your feet, and therefore it appears beautiful. But when you leave, it will no longer be so. There are certain particular marks on the feet of the Lord which distinguish the Lord from others. The marks of a flag, thunderbolt, an instrument to drive an elephant, umbrella, lotus, disc, etc., are on the bottom of the Lord's feet. These marks are impressed upon the soft dust of the land where the Lord traverses. The land of Hastinapur was thus marked while Lord Shri Krishna was there with the Pandavas. And the kingdom of the Pandavas thus flourished by such auspicious signs. Kunti Devi pointed out these distinguished features and was afraid of ill luck in the absence of the Lord. So this is an important point. Today, Delhi, which was anciently known as Hastinapur, is marked with the footprints of Gandhi, Nehru, Indira Gandhi, and all these people who are not Krishna and definitely are an illusion. So there's no auspiciousness there. Therefore, the environment is contaminated. There's constant stress. There's overpopulation. There's environmental dangerous conditions and so forth, because they've taken Krishna out. Now, there are a few havens, like ISKCON temples in Delhi. I think there's like 9 or 10 temples in Delhi, and maybe more. Those are auspicious places. But in a city that has over 20 million people, that's almost nothing, right? 20 million people, more than 20 million people, it's a huge population in a small area. Therefore, the need for thousands of temples of bona fide Vaishnava culture are needed to overcome such contamination. And people are getting more and more contaminated. And this is in the land. This is where Kunti Devi and the Pandavas lived. This is where Krishna walked and benedicted the land with the marks of his transcendental feet. So we see that in Kali Yuga things degrade to such a point where the most auspicious place, due to the preponderance of unclean people, becomes contaminated. Therefore, we have to increase our preaching. Now, we're not living in Delhi, we're living in Seattle. We have to increase our preaching to transform a place like Seattle and Washington State into into Vrindavan. It's possible, but it depends on how much we're determined to practice Krishna consciousness and preach. If we don't do any preaching, Prabhupada says, if you preach, you'll be successful. And the opposite is true. If you don't preach, you will not be successful. Right? And successful, it doesn't mean building big temples and having a lot of material success, a lot of money and things like that. Successful means, are you actually Krishna conscious or not? If you're not Krishna conscious, you can't convince another person to be Krishna conscious. And if you are genuinely Krishna conscious, you are able to convince others. So we have to get more proactive in our following of sadhana bhakti and our ability to influence others by our words, by our actions, by our thoughts, and by our kindness. So we have a great opportunity here in Seattle, but we don't have enough preachers. Just like in the United States Army, there's only about 100,000 real warriors in an army of 2.5 million. These are the guys that actually fight and kill and win battles. There's only about 100,000 that are trained to actually fight. You need a lot of training to be able to pull a trigger and kill somebody. It's not an easy thing to develop the mentality of fighting and being brave and not being a coward. And we see that was also present 5,000 years ago, where the son of Virata, he was a coward. He made some big boastful statements that he was going to go and fight against the Kurus. But when he got on the battlefield, Krishna was driving his chariot. When he got on the battlefield, he fainted when he saw the Kurus. They were so gigantic people and so muscular, and they had so many arms. He fainted. And then Krishna single-handedly defeated them all. Right? And when the boy woke up during the battle and he saw what was going on, he fainted again because it was too scary what was going on. Right? But later on he told his father, he said, this person's not a servant. This guy is Arjuna, the great archer. We've been in an illusion about who he is. I saw him. He defeated the whole Kuru army. There was the Karna and Dushasana, and this one and that one. He defeated all of them. Duryodhana defeated them all. So To be a warrior is not an easy thing. It requires years and years of training to be able to be so disciplined and to be able to pull the trigger and actually kill somebody. Right? So, in the same way, to be an effective preacher takes years of training and the ability to actually convince someone to become Krishna conscious is not an easy thing, especially in the world as it is today. To convince ourselves to become a devotee is not an easy thing. You see. So unless we become fixed up ourselves in Krishna consciousness and expert in preaching this philosophy, we're not going to go anywhere. We're not going to go. I remember when we had the plans to build this temple, half of the devotees were against it. When we had the plan to have the first major festival, 9/10 of the devotees were against it. They thought we were going to waste our money on something that's not Krishna conscious. You see. When George Washington formed an army to fight the British, 3/4 of the population of the colonies were against it. Well, there was just a few people that were for fighting the British and getting independence. You see, so it's not new. Most devotees don't understand what Krishna consciousness is all about. It's not about personal salvation. It's about glorifying Krishna through Harinam Sankirtan. And unless we become conscious of this, we are in many ways missing the boat. Or we're missing the Vaikuntha transit back to Godhead. Just like because Tukaram's wife was always criticizing him and didn't agree with what he was doing. When Lord Vishnu sent Garuda to bring Tukaram back to the spiritual world, Tukaram sent a message to his wife, hurry up, come, Garuda is going to leave very soon. But because she was always angry at her husband, always against what he was doing, she didn't make it. And she arrived when Garuda was flying away with Tukaram. See, so negative people never make it. Negative people never make it. Those people are always criticizing, always finding fault, always saying, this is not going to work, that's not going to work, this is not a good idea, blah, 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 blah. They never make it. Any idea, even a bad idea, will work if people cooperate. And even if it's something that's a bad idea, if Krishna is protecting the good devotees, he'll turn it into a good idea. Okay? Just like many times Arjuna might have hesitated, or Yudhisthira hesitated, whatever, but Krishna turned it into a victory. So, we should not be negative, we should be positive and work cooperatively and understand that our mission is to be able to convince people to become Krishna conscious. That's what Prabhupada did. He was able to convince people to become Krishna conscious and to cooperate. And because of that, he was successful. And he was able to do that because of his complete faith in his Guru and in Krishna. Then you can be a positive person. Srila Prabhupada Patita Pavane Ki Jai Nitai Gaura Premanandi Haribol Haribol.